There was a time when TV didn't care if you were safe. Before algorithms neatly filed entertainment into sanitized age brackets, there existed a lawless, beautiful gray area on cable TV and rental shelves. It was a place where PG rating meant a child might witness a lady peeling her face off, and a cartoon character on a Saturday morning might actually be a weaponized cybernetic cop who just watched his partner get liquidated. We didn't just watch movies back then, we survived them. In the mid 80s, Hollywood accidentally invented a new genre, the childhood existential crisis. Directors like Joe Dante and Jim Henson seemed to look at children's stories not as a cozy blanket, but a gateway into the grotesque. They understood something modern studios have forgotten. To a kid, a bedroom isn't always safe. The floorboards might actually open up to a literal demon dimension, and sometimes the sweet old lady down the hall is just waiting to turn you into a mouse. Getting a new pet is a feeling most people can relate to. But what if that pet was a creature you'd never seen before and it came with a set of instructions that sounded like they were concocted by the Baba Yaga? 1984's Gremlins answers that very question. And if the body horror wasn't enough, the scene where Kate describes how they found her dad left my oldest son telling me, "This isn't a kid's movie." We watched that movie leading up to Halloween, and another movie on our list was 1990's The Witches. While I watched Gremlins with my kids to explain the chimney scene to them, I didn't think I had to watch this all the way through, and absconded to the kitchen to catch up on dishes. Wrist deep in suds, I hear my son again, but this time with a yell, "This is not for kids!" I hurried to the living room to see what scene was playing, and it was the one where they're removing their faces. I wish I could say this particular scene skipped my mind, but that's untrue. This scene has been seared into my mind as long as I can remember, and I was simply waiting for their reaction. Movies like The Gate and Little Monsters explore the idea of portals to another world within the safety of the home. I've never seen The Gate, but the concept is sound and aligns with the motif of a kid's movie that doesn't really feel like one. Ironically, Stephen Dorff is also in another movie I saw a lot as a kid, but definitely wasn't a kid's movie, and that was Blade. I watched Little Monsters a lot growing up. It's something my older sister showed. The movie has a lot of odd choices, but the scene that stuck with me the most is the one where the kid gets his head ripped off. Simon Birch is a movie I recently covered for the Death in Kids media video. Please check that out after this if you haven't already, and also like and subscribe. Hit the hype button so I can get some of that alphabet money. But that movie feels very adult. It covers disability, has a lot of sexual comedy, and has a body count. I know in the 90s a lot of studios were trying to make content for kids that helped them transition into adulthood, but this movie feels oddly out of place among movies like The Sandlot. As I get older, I realize how much I am like my dad. I showed my kids Gremlins and The Witches because I saw them when I was young and they left an impression on me. When I was young, my dad did the same and showed me 1981's Time Bandits. I truly hate this movie and hated watching it as a kid. It runs an hour 56 and it feels like it took 3 days to watch. It feels like it was filmed in a dirty cupboard with a dirty camera. The ending is completely fucked up. I probably should have covered it for the death video, but the less said about this movie is the better. I just gotta say, I wrote all this without watching a trailer to the movie or anything. I haven't seen anything about this movie in probably like 25 years. It actually doesn't look half bad, and I might give it a shot. Dark Crystal almost slipped my mind writing this, but good God, this movie is horrific. I don't know if it's how bleak the vibe is or the uncanny valley between us and the main characters, but this movie sucks, and I had no nostalgia for it, so when it returned, it did not appear on any of my screens at home. There's no greater historical irony than the 1980s marketing machine. This was an era where a movie could feature a man being dissolved in toxic waste and splattered across a windshield, and the immediate corporate response was, "Perfect, let's sell this to 7-year-olds as an action figure with a cap gun mechanic." We grew up in a culture where hyper-violent, hard R action blockbusters like RoboCop and Terminator were casually repackaged into our Saturday morning cereal boxes, transforming breathless, high-octane practical stunt work into our everyday childhood playground. I know our dads were to blame with movies like Rambo and Bloodsport, and some of these fall into line because of their sequels. But RoboCop originally was a critique of America and what capitalism will do to us as a society. The first movie plays very heavily into that with the news interruptions. While those aspects are not lost in the second movie, it clearly was gearing up for what was ultimately to come with the third movie, the toyification of RoboCop. This movie ironically became one of the very things it was trying to criticize. Another irony on this list is that Paul Verhoeven has not one, but two very adult movies that ended up being enjoyed by kids en masse. His second credit here comes with the 1997 classic Starship Troopers. I guess it's hard to make a sci-fi adventure with space fascism and not have it market itself to children. I remember watching this so often as a kid, and the gore and violence always stayed with me. Plus, the nutsack-looking brain bug is a real nightmare. A movie that did suffer from a massive toyification, but waited a few decades to destroy its credibility as a film series, was the Terminator franchise. T1 and T2 are the best duology of action movies, blending the genres so well it almost feels like a completely different idea in itself. Similarly, Predator also feels like an action film, but is actually a horror flick. Movies like these truly defined the decade they came out, as well as informed the decades following. For a more contemporary example, I think the Transformer movies are right in line with this. Even more so with the fact that Transformers was kids' media. The show was just a giant toy commercial. The first movie would almost get a pass if it were a standalone film. But the over-the-top violence, the vulgar language, and the troubling depictions of women definitely don't leave a lot of room for any sort of moral in the story. These movies are all pedal and all metal. Comedy used to demand that you pay attention to the entire frame. If you blinked while watching Airplane, you missed 3 background visual gags, a deliberate continuity error, and a piece of absolute conceptual anarchy. That relentless style of humor didn't stay polite. It evolved into the unchecked chaotic id of the 90s and 2000s, where weaponized stupidity, like Dumb and Dumber and Adam Sandler, paved the way for the boundary-shedding, zero-filter satire of Team America and the Sausage Party. It was comedy that actively dared the network censors to try and stop it. Again, a lot of these were probably shown to you by your dad. I know my dad showed me Airplane as soon as he could get away with it. Obviously, a lot of the jokes went over my head, but I still remember my dad's face after I looked at him because of the boobs. I could tell he was waiting for this because he had a big grin and was chuckling. Another movie I inherited from my father at a young age was Animal House. This was a movie I barely understood then. All the jokes went over my head, and I remember feeling like it was filmed very crudely, much like Time Bandits. Everyone loves Adam Sandler, and rightfully so. From all accounts, he's a good dude to the people in his life, and he's humble around strangers, and just in general doesn't take things too seriously. I haven't seen much of his serious work, but I'm almost positive I can name his comedies I haven't seen on one hand. All that praise aside, most Adam Sandler comedies probably aren't great to show your kids. Obviously things have changed, and he has toned it down a bit, but I remember the craziness of 8 Crazy Nights. Everyone was losing their minds with how over the top it was. His humor is mildly offensive, and most of his jokes thread the line pretty well. I'm not saying people shouldn't watch it or show it to their kids, but you can always tell who was raised with these movies predominantly playing in the background. I find it kind of funny and a little ironic that Sandler doesn't actually seem to be much like his characters in his movies. He's humble, relaxed, and overall actually human. Just gonna put my top Sandler movies in for fun. Another amazing comedian who every child from the 90s and 2000s loved was Jim Carrey. While Carrey did star in a few kids' movies specifically, I think the Pet Detective series perfectly encapsulates the idea of kids' movies not meant for kids. The first movie wasn't really designed for kids, but ended up being a hit with them, so they leaned into that idea more so with the second movie. Again, I don't think anyone should censor these from their kids' media diet, but I saw the second movie first, and the first movie when I was in my teens. It felt better that way. The first movie has a lot more adult themes and ideas. Not that the second one doesn't, but there's less and more over-the-top humor that kids love. Plus, I also just realized that there's literally a kids' version of this movie. When the sun went down, The television landscape used to shift from a safe corporate programming to a lawless stoner surrealist sanctuary, broadcast under the banner of Adult Swim. This was the ultimate destination for the kids who grew up on the fringes of media. A place that took low budget animations, bizarre talk show format disruptions, and forgotten Fox holdovers, and turned them into a high art form of midnight subversion. But hidden deep within that late night block was a Trojan horse of hyper stylized, dark, and uncompromising Japanese animation that was about to change our relationship with fear forever. Because I couldn't remember exactly what was on when I was 13, I had to look it up, and in 2007, we had such amazing shows as Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Such an amazing intro. Gotta love low budget animation in general, but Jesus, that show gets so weird. Metalocalypse. I remember when this came out, I had a lot of metalhead friends that loved it. I thought it was okay, but I was just a prude and didn't really like Screamo in those days. I'm glad I have evolved in my tastes though, because anytime I catch an episode of this show, I love it so much. Maybe I just messed with my friends. Shout out to Bailey and Trevor. Squibblies and Moral Oral, I'm just going to name those shows, and show they both have always given me the ick. Frisky Dingo, Lucy, Daughter of the Devil, and The Drinky Grow Show I never actually saw. Assy McGee was a show I never really sat down and watched, but I always found it hilarious. I'm guessing it's the pet detective coming through, but this show will always hold a special place in my butt. Xavier Renegade Angel is going to be the last of the comedies I mention, because I remember watching this trippy-ass show a lot as a kid. It was so weird, and after doing drugs, I realized that this show made me feel like I was on drugs. I vividly remember the animes on Adult Swim giving me very weird feelings as a kid. Things like Fooly Cooly had concepts my 5-year-old brain wasn't ready to handle at the time. Berserk wasn't on Adult Swim, but I remember watching it way too young, and the scene where Guts kills Adonis messed me up to this day. On a darker note, things like Death Note and Blood Plus dabbled in the horror side of anime that I personally love so much. I'm struggling finding one particular anime. I might be confusing it with just some Blood Plus out of context, but what I remember is a hyper-gory werewolf anime about groups of werewolves fighting each other in a modern Japan. Once your eyes were open to the dark, uncompromising worlds of midnight animation, there was no going back to the safety of mainstream cinema. You had crossed a line. Your brain was rewired, primed for the ultimate destination of the pipeline. You weren't looking for comedies anymore. You were looking for the things that lived in the dark, the things that moved in the shadows just outside the frame. You wanted to see how far the terror could take you. You wanted to see what happens when the monster finally catches you. Welcome to the golden era of visceral, uncompromising horror. In space, no one can hear you scream. But in your living room late at night, everyone in your house can. So for those of us who stayed up late to watch Aliens when we weren't supposed to, we might have inadvertently woken others up in our house as the chest burster breaks through this rather mundane space story about space truckers thinking about forming a space union. The Aliens franchise clearly was never intended for kids, and yet there's an abundance of Aliens merchandise directly aimed at kids. I showed this to my sons, and they were honestly more interested in the first half of the movie, with all the boring shit, than they ever were with any of the Star Wars movies. I've brought him up a few times already, but my oldest son was actually born on Friday the 13th. I've never shown him the film series, but just wait until Halloween and go into a costume store, or even just sit at a park and see the trick-or-treaters. To this day, you are bound to find a child dressed in a hockey mask with a plastic machete. Both of my sons went as Ghostface last year for Halloween, and I have even donned the face of William Shatner to portray a convincing Michael Myers for a spooky fun time. For whatever reason, the slasher villain has always held a place in kids' hearts. Hell, this idea even plays a factor in one of the Friday movies. Creepshow and later Tales of the Crypt are amazing horror anthology series. Back when movies could be made, and not everything had to please a mass audience, weird and gross things could happen. While there are a lot of stories from both of these series, I'd like to hone in specifically on Demon Night. I and a lot of people I know saw this movie as a kid.
I don't know if it's just the charm of Billy Zane, or maybe because there's a kid in the movie, but this movie was a kid's movie to me and always will be. I know it's definitely not, and I won't be showing it to my kids, but if I had all these movies I've listed in physical form, I would put this right between The Gate and Little Monsters. And then I would throw Time Bandits in the trash.
The pipeline was seamless. The kid who got traumatized by the puppets and gremlins grew up to sneak a viewing of Terminator, who grew up to stay awake for Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It was a continuous chain of counterculture appreciation, a generation raised on the tangible, the shocking, and the bizarre. But as we look at the modern media landscape that is fiercely
Focus grouped, bloodless,
and safe, you have to wonder, where do the gateway cinephiles go when the midnight movie spirit is finally put to sleep?